Why are we here? What's the point of everything? And what are we supposed to do with all the time that we have? Well, for millennia, people have been asking these questions. The answers have led to some pretty powerful and life-altering philosophies. These aren't just boring academic theories that are locked away in a book somewhere, but these are outlooks on life. Think of them like a operating system, if you will, for your reality. So today I thought we'd take a look at 5 of some of the most common outlooks that perhaps could help you challenge the reality of your own life and how you define it. We'll look into what they are and how they compare to each other and what, if anything, they ask us. If you've ever wished life came with an instruction manual, this may help. You're about to be handed 5 of them. All right, well, we'll start with the big one. We all probably have heard of this one. The philosophy of nihilism often serves as a terrifying ground zero for any search for meaning. At its heart, nihilism is the stance that life has no built-in meaning or purpose or value. It just suggests that the cosmos and everything in it is inherently pointless. It's that unsettling thought that our struggles and our wins and our joys and our losses and heartbreaks are all ultimately meaningless in a cold and silent universe. This idea of nihilism can branch out into something like moral nihilism, for instance, that argues there's no such thing as an objective right or a wrong. Those are just human inventions. Some nihilists even suggest that a true knowledge is impossible to attain. It's pretty easy to see why nihilism gets a bad reputation as a dark and pessimistic and even destructive worldview. If nothing matters, then why bother doing anything? This is exactly what Nietzsche warned us about. He wasn't a nihilist himself. Come at me in the comments if you'd like. I'd be happy to go more into that. But he did predict that as people lost faith in traditional religion, they'd be hit with a massive sense of meaninglessness. But you can look at this in 2 ways. There's a passive nihilism, which leads towards apathy and despair, a feeling of, well, if nothing matters, then what's the point? But there's also a more active nihilism. It's the idea that by destroying all of the old imposed meanings, we're finally free to create our own meaning. In that sense, nihilism isn't an answer so much as a horrifying question. What if there's nothing? These next 4 philosophies are basically an attempt to try to answer that question. So from the emptiness that is nihilism, let's take a look at a more practical and grounded thing, Stoicism. Stoicism is less concerned with the universe and more focused on one question. How do we live a good, peaceful life in a world that's completely out of our control? The idea is the dichotomy of control. It teaches that we must separate what we can and what we cannot control. External events like what people think about us, or to some extent our health, the economy, these things are ultimately not in our hands. But our inner world, our judgments and reactions to things that happen to us, our choices for the most part, these are entirely ours. So the Stoics' main job is to put all of their energy into what they can control and accept the rest with a calm peace of mind. And Stoicism isn't about being emotionless or a robot. That's a very big misconception about it, but it's about emotional strength. It's not about being a slave to destructive feelings like rage or panic. When something seems bad, the Stoic would ask, is this in my control? If the answer is no, then worrying about it is a waste of time. And if the answer is yes, then worrying is just a distraction from doing something about it. For a Stoic, the ultimate goal is virtue. It's about doing the right thing for the right reasons, no matter what happens. Real happiness in this sense doesn't come from money or fame, but the inner satisfaction of knowing that you've acted with good character. And in this world with endless uncertainty, Stoicism is a good outlook for inner peace. Now, from the disciplined acceptance that the Stoics would have, let's go to the, we could say, radical freedom of the existentialists. If nihilism asks this question, what if there's no meaning? Existentialism would say, well, that's great, then let's create some. This movement, which took off in the mid-20th century, at least under that name, it could go back a little further with Kierkegaard and whatnot, but we'll say under the name existentialism, Sartre, Heidegger, things like this, they put the individual at the absolute center of their own universe. Sartre was all about this idea of existence precedes essence. So what does that mean? Well, it means you're not born with a predefined purpose or identity and essence. You're not a glass of wine designed from the get-go to hold wine. You're simply born as a blank slate of pure existence. You're put into the world, and it's only through your choices and your actions that you define who you are. This gives you an incredible amount of freedom, but it comes with a lot of responsibility for that. You can't blame God or nature, your friends, your parents for who you become. You are, as Sartre said, condemned to be free. Existentialism would agree that the universe is inherently meaningless, which can cause a little bit of anxiety. But instead of giving in to that and to the despair of it, the existentialists would embrace this freedom. They live an authentic life by owning their choices and creating a life that is a true expression of their own self-made values. I think these are some pretty cool ideas, and if you're liking it, do me a favor and subscribe. I get into these types of topics every so often here on this channel, so it would help me out and keep me making them, so I would appreciate it. Now, we'll get back to it. This next idea you could say is a quirky friend of existentialism, and that would be absurdism. And this is most famously associated with Camus. Camus' central problem of being human is the absurd. The absurd isn't just that the universe is meaningless. It's the conflict between our deep and human need to find meaning and the universe's cold and silent refusal to give us any. That's the absurd situation that we're all in. So, what can we do about that? Well, Camus thought that we had three options. First would be what he would call philosophical suicide, which is a leap of faith, essentially. You escape the absurd by adopting a belief system, a religion, or a rigid ideology of some sort, something that can give you all of the answers. Secondly, there would be a literal suicide, deciding that a life without built-in meaning isn't worth living. Camus didn't really like either one of these, and he pushes for a third option, an option of revolt. To live in revolt means you fully accept the absurd, but you don't resign yourself to it. You live with the constant tension of knowing you want meaning and the universe doesn't care, and yet you live passionately anyway. It's about looking the meaninglessness of the universe in the face and finding value not in some grand purpose, but in the struggle of life itself. Camus famously used the myth of Sisyphus as a metaphor. I'm sure you know, but Sisyphus would roll the boulder up the hill only to have it roll back down every single time. It was pointless and hopeless. Yet Camus famously says we must imagine Sisyphus happy. Well, why? Because as Sisyphus walks back down the hill, he is fully aware of his fate. He has no illusions. And it's in that clear moment that he is master of his tragedy. His rebellion, his refusal to give in to despair is the victory. Absurdism is about finding joy not in escaping meaninglessness, but in living in spite of it. Now, after having gone through all of those places, we arrive at our final and perhaps the most direct outlook. That would be hedonism. The word comes from the Greek for pleasure. Hedonism is a belief that the most important goal in life is to maximize pleasure and to minimize pain. It's the stance that what is good is what feels good and what is bad is what feels bad. Now, that is often misunderstood or caricatured as a simple, nonstop party of sensual indulgence, shall we say. But there are more thoughtful approaches to it. You could say that true and lasting pleasure isn't from intense short term highs, which, as we know, can often lead to long term pain, but in a state of tranquility and contentment. This means prioritizing things like a friendship, a simple pleasure, freedom from anxiety over wild excess. For a refined hedonist, avoiding future pain is just as important as seeking a present pleasure. Where the Stoic seeks virtue and the absurdist rebels against the cosmos, the hedonist operates on a much simpler idea. Will this lead to more overall pleasure and less pain in my life? The goal isn't to argue with the silent universe, but to build the most enjoyable and least painful experience you can while operating within that universe. And what you get is a life that is, by your own measure, filled with as much good stuff as possible. So that's our tour, as it were. 5 huge ideas, although very much simplified, that have shaped the world. And these aren't just labels that we can throw around, although a lot of people do, but they're lenses that you can use to look at your own life and your own beliefs. From an empty void to the power of creation, each one offers a different answer to the question of what it means to be human. So the final question is for you. Which one of these hits closest to home? Is there one that challenges you, one that comforts you? Let me know what you think down in the comments. And if this video sparked something new for you or gave you a different way of looking at things, I'd appreciate a like and a subscription. And more importantly, if you could share it with someone who you think would get something out of it. Thanks for listening.